So in order to do that, what we're going to do is hit the tab key, start typing in paint, and just drop in a paint node. And then immediately out of this end node here, we're going to drag over and connect this paint, and then make that visible. Now right off the bat, there's a lot of really cool options in here. You can change all of these brush settings to do, if you want to do a circle brush, square brush, or bring in your own bitmap. You can change the radius pressure, the brush angle, opacity, all this really cool brush options in here. For symmetry, if we are symmetrical across a reflective axis, not in a rotational axis, we're going to say we're symmetrical across the x-axis. So if you see down here in the corner, we have x, y, and z, and or even right here in the middle, we have x, y, and z. We're symmetrical across this x-axis here, across the z. So we're going to say in x, y, and z, this axis, we are symmetrical, so we're going to hit 1. And now we can paint symmetrically. And then you have stroke options over here. So a lot of really cool ways to change your brush stroke. But we'll go back over here to operation. And now we need to be able to paint on our mesh. If I scroll over here, you see I'm still in selection mode. So go over here and click on this handle, show handle icon right here. And now when I hover over my mesh, I get a little round circle. And again, just like when you're in the brush mode, we're painting with a circle shape. So that's why we have a circle. And at the very bottom of your screen, you're going to see some shortcuts for how to manipulate this selection. So if we go over here, we can see left mouse for foreground color. So you can just start painting with your foreground color and your left, with using your left mouse, middle mouse to switch over to your background color. So by default, this is already filled with white. So as we're painting with white in our foreground color, it's not doing much. However, when I hit middle mouse, it's going to switch over here to background color automatically. And then we can paint in that direction. And I didn't notice before, if we go back here to symmetry, we have axis and X and Z turned on. Let's go ahead and change Z back down to 0, or undo this stroke. And then under the symmetry here, we have X on 1. Let's go ahead and change Z down to 0. And now when we go over here to brush with our middle mouse, we're painting that background color. And then left mouse again is white, so then we can just kind of paint that out. If we want to change that foreground color, we can go ahead and change that to say like a red. And now we can paint with red. So that's just the basics of the paint swap node. But what we want to do instead of just painting on our object is paint on an attribute. In this case, where we want to keep the high-res geometry and where we want to have low-res geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the tab key here and start typing in attribute create. And in between these two nodes, we're going to put in an attribute create node. Now for the name of this attribute, let's go ahead and call this high-res, I guess. So now when we middle mouse click on the result of this for each loop, you're going to see we have 1 point attribute right here, P. However, when we middle mouse click on this result, you're going to see we've added a point attribute, one called high res, and then the same one we had before, which was P. So now when we start painting on this object, what I want to do is paint on that high res attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off create missing color and alpha attributes. And I'm going to say override color with high res. And now when I start painting on my object, and it's down at the bottom, it says shift left drag to change the brush radius. Let's go ahead and drag that way up. So now when I'm painting on here, you're going to see it's painting this infrared red on top of this purple right now. And that's not because I have this foreground color set to red. If we set this back to white where it should be, that doesn't really matter. We're just changing the attribute values. If you go back to your geometry spreadsheet and you go to points, you're going to see if we drag over here to the right, we have our high-res point attributes, and as we're painting, those values are going to change. And if you middle mouse paint, that's going to paint the background color, which is going to paint out those values. And while I'm thinking about it, I want to give a shout out to Gianvito Serra. I was watching his YouTube videos online, and watching his paint swap tutorial is basically exactly what I'm doing here. So anyway, let's go back to our original node view here, and I'll go ahead and undo. And again, let's go ahead and paint these areas where we want to retain our high-res mesh. So we can just, again, big brush strokes. We want all this stuff back here to be high res, anything that's camera facing back here to retain a little bit higher level of fidelity in our geometry count. And then if you want to, you can also middle mouse paint up here and go ahead and remove that paint information. If you want to smooth these transitions, instead of doing a paint operation, you can drop this down. You can do a smooth operation, and then you can hit apply to all. And then as you do that, it'll start smoothing that gradient out. And then you can switch over here back to paint. And there we go. If you want to, if we're in the visualize mode of infrared right now, if you change it to like white to red, you'll just have white and red. Feel free to choose any of these things that make more sense. If you like looking at a grayscale mask, maybe this is a better choice. Infrared looks pretty cool, so I go ahead and keep it there. So now how do we make this paint information affect our poly reduce? We're going to go ahead and take this paint and drop it into our poly reduce here. Go ahead and select it and make it visible. And you're going to see after doing that, nothing really changed because we have to tell it. If we scroll down, we want to retain that density by an attribute. So we're going to turn that on. And by default, it's set to retention. We don't need that. So I'm going to click this little drop-down arrow here, and you're going to see our attribute that we're able to pull from is our high-res attribute that we used in our paint. So go ahead and check that one on. And now you can see wherever we painted, we're getting more polygons, and where we didn't, we're getting fewer polygons. If you want to make that even more drastically different, let's change this weight to say 5. There we go. So you see at the front here, there's hardly any polygons at all, and then back here, much more of a dense mesh where the camera is going to be. You'll also notice if we middle mouse click over here and look at the polygon count, it's 19,999. So remember back when we plugged in our original value up here, we're still sitting at 20,000. So it's basically just redistributing those polygons within that 20,000 polygon limit that we gave it. Also, you can look down here in the corner because we turned that on. So anyway, using the paint SOP to determine where those polygons are going to be distributed. And like we mentioned before, if you hold down Control and click this lock icon, any upstream nodes won't be cooked. So if I want to move these things over, I can just quickly move them. And then we're back down here where we started.